Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is L3 the Eagle. Today I am going to be doing a tier list on the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom bosses and main bosses. Originally, I was going to do a tier list based off one of the options that I had in a poll that I had created on the community section of my channel. Unfortunately, not many people were seeing that apparently, because I asked some of my friends about it if they had seen it. Apparently, they hadn't seen it, so I don't know if that's exactly something that I need to figure out. But I also, upon looking for tier list templates on the tier maker website, I found a tier list on the enemies, and I realized extremely quickly that a lot of the pictures that were used were not that great in my opinion. Some of the pictures I could make out pretty well, some of them I could not. And there's also a lot of variations to different enemies, so if I wanted to go through the painstaking process of trying to find better pictures, saving them to the computer, downloading them to use on a tier list, then I having to delete them, then I would have had a really rough time with that, and I really didn't want to do that. So I decided to kind of change up what the plan is. So for those of you who did finally eventually manage to vote, hoping to see a tier list on the enemies of Tears of the Kingdom. I do apologize for changing the plans up, but it was also really kind of last second, and I felt like I needed to get a video out there at some point, and I really wanted to, and I just did not really feel like going through the painstaking process of looking on Google for pictures, downloading them onto my computer, then to the tier list, and then deleting them eventually. I didn't want to do that, so I decided to change it up. I hope this is still good, and I hope y'all enjoy it. And like I said, make sure you're notified. My friends I talked to, they said they were getting notifications whenever I sent out a video, but I guess they didn't get one whenever the community thing popped up. I don't know exactly how that works. I'm still kind of learning the ropes with that type of stuff. But, so the way this tier list is going to work is I'm going to be ranking the main bosses and the bosses of Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. We have 6 tiers that any of these can go into. S tier is going to be the bosses or mini bosses that were the most fun and most challenging, and the most rewarding out of the candidates on this list. A tier is they were pretty good bosses and mini bosses to fight. Some pretty rewarding for the most part. Not too many issues, but not good enough to be exactly S tier. B tier is bosses that they're pretty good. Not as good as A or S tier, but they're pretty good. Maybe some minor flaws to them. But other than that, they're pretty good, pretty decent. Reward you decently when fighting them. C tier is they are okay. Maybe they didn't have too much to go for. Or they're maybe variant dependent. The C tier candidates are ones that they do give some reward, but maybe they might be a little annoying depending on which variant they are. D tier is they are slightly annoying bosses to face. These would be bosses or mini bosses that just sometimes got on my nerves to the point where it was hard to appreciate how challenging they were. Maybe if they are bosses or mini bosses from Breath of the Wild, maybe they've fallen off a bit due to how different the games are with some of the features that it has. F tier is for the candidates that maybe they just don't really seem too much like bosses, or they're forgettable. Maybe they don't give that much of an award for it. Some of these will probably just give either very bad drops if you face them again, or maybe they just are very bland boss fights. Pretty much the worst boss fights imaginable in the game. But we'll get started. First up, we have the Stone Talus. In both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, regular taluses on their own are relatively... The thing that makes them challenging is you have to hit a weak point, which is usually located on top of them or on their back, where it's hard to hit them. But with Tears of the Kingdom, the taluses are relatively easier thanks to the Ascend rune. The Ascend rune helps with getting Link up onto the top of the talus, like on its head or body or what. I don't know if it's its head or body or both. I'm going to assume it's both, but it gets it on top of them. With Stone Talus fortresses, the thing that makes them a lot more difficult than the regular Talus is the fact that they have other enemies like little bokoblins on them, which make it a little difficult, but not too difficult. As long as you get rid of them quickly with a few well-placed arrow shots, you can take care of the bokoblins or moblins or whatever they are, and then you can use Sin, get on top of it, and then hit the crystal with usually no difficulty. It may knock you off a little bit, but for the most part, it is... It's a really okay. It's a good boss. Stone Talus, like I said, the Ascension rune has made it easier to fight. In Breath of the Wild, I found them a little annoying because they had the weak point on the back of them or on like the top of them, and trying to hit the weak point on them while they're trying to move to face you is really difficult. And then having them turn around very quickly, because despite their size, they do quickly turn around, but they are a little easier with the Ascension in this game, so I think they're pretty okay. The Stone Talus also gives good rewards, which is why I put it above the regular Talus, because with the Stone Talus you get both the gems that you get from knocking or hitting its weak points, and you get the monster parts from the enemies that are on top of it, so it's a little more rewarding than the regular Talus. Next up, we have Colgiris. This was the first boss that I faced in Tears of the Kingdom, and in my opinion, it is one of the funnest bosses in this game. With Colgiris, I would like to compare it to the Windblight Ganon. In my opinion, if I had to compare them, Colgiris is, in my opinion, a lot better than Windblight Ganon, because it does have that fun element of being able to use the air current to propel yourself up and then either letting go of the glider and then dropping down on its weak points once it exposes them, or using the arrows and hitting its weak points when it exposes them or when it flies in front of you where it exposes its underside of the weak points. And it is really fun. Once you beat it in the air temple, you can go into the depths. In some locations you may be able to fight it again, and it gives a pretty good drop in the form of one of its mandibles, and it also, the mandible is good for combining with the weapons such as the boomerang. Overall, really fun boss fight. I'm going to put it in A tier. Next up, we have Dragon Form Demon King Ganondorf. If I had to compare this boss to enemies from Breath of the Wild, I would mainly compare it to the final boss, which is Beast Ganon. In my opinion, Dragon Form Demon King Ganondorf is a whole lot better than Beast Ganon, because in my opinion, Dragon Form Ganon, what it does lack in a diverse amount of attacks, it does make up for, and being very rewarding in the fact that you get to land the final blow. And it also does have a cool design. My biggest gripe with it is I wish it had a little more diversity in attack. It's cool that it does shoot the gloom out, but I wish it did more. Like, I wish you could be riding on the light dragon and maybe it charges and grabs hold of it, and then you have to maybe break, like, make it let go or something. Or maybe you have to use the light dragon to attack its neck or something. And then, as the light dragon is attacking it before it breaks free, you have to quickly jump onto it or fly and then land on it and hit its eyes. I think that would be a little bit cooler instead of having to kind of glide onto it and wait for it to get into a position where you can land on it. It does have some factors that do make it challenging, because you can't just land on it and run straight to the closest eye, because it does some gloom damage. Not that that's a factor as long as you have max amount of hearts. And if it does hit you with its charge attack, or like any part of it, like its claws or something, or its head, then it's going to take away those gloom infected hearts. In my opinion, I really can't put this higher than A tier. I think it's slightly above Colgiris. But the thing that holds it back, in my opinion, is the lack of attack. Like, it doesn't have that many cool attacks or stages to its attacks. It just flies around, maybe charges at you every once in a while. You can't really touch it because if you land on him, you'll get infected by gloom. If he hits you with his, I guess, charge attack, it takes away your hearts. There's not really much to it compared to its other stages before it. Speaking of, next up we have the Demon King Ganondorf. This boss fight, in my opinion, was really fun, really challenging. I had some difficulty with figuring out his attacks. Even when I did kind of figure out his attack patterns, he still proved to be very challenging, and compared to Beast Ganon from Breath of the Wild, he definitely cemented himself as a final boss in this game. And I really enjoyed this variation of Ganondorf. I like his design. I like how he seems to get a kick out of battle. I like how he loves to battle, and it is really fun trying to figure out his attacks. One of his stages is really fun because he brings out Phantom Ganons to help him, and then your comrades come and help you, and you have to kind of avoid the Phantom Ganons and him at the same time. So you kind of have to also be focused more on him than the Phantom Ganons. Overall, really fun boss fight. I really like each stage of his in his Demon King form. I'm going to put him as a solid S tier. Next up, we have the horde of his minions. Now, I'll be honest with this one. I don't really consider too many of, like, the bases, like the monster bases or hordes, to be really boss fights. Like, I get that they have the little boss meter, and each time you take out one of the members to it, it goes down, but in my opinion, they do not really count as a boss in that sense. So for me, I kind of have to put them in F tier. Next up, we have the Fire Gleeoks, which are a 3-headed dragon with 1 eye on each head, and there are 3 variations, or no, there's 4 variations to it. The fire one, in my opinion, is it's like a middle, like it's not as annoying as ice and lightning, and also not as challenging, but at the same time, it does have its moments. In my opinion, the Fire Gleeok is okay. Its main attack is it shoots like a stream of or a beam of fire at you, and then its like final hurrah type of attack that does is it does like a giant fireball that covers a large area. But in my opinion, they were relatively weak compared to the other variants of Gleeoks. Some people might say otherwise, but in my opinion, from what I observed, like with the other Gleeok variants, I really didn't feel like that they were too easy. Because like the worst that the Fire Gleeoks are going to do is they're going to hit you with a very powerful attack. The beams do a decent amount of damage. The giant fireball does a crap ton of damage. And the fire can sometimes be a hazard in itself, like having a giant area that's set on fire because of that. Trying to walk through that without like the proper gear on is it can make the battle a bit more challenging. But in my opinion, the Fire Gleeok at best I will have to put above the Stone or the Talus Fortress and the Stone Talus. I can't really put it higher because, like I said, in my opinion, it's the weaker of the 3, or of the 4 variants of the Gleeoks. It's definitely not an enemy I would go out seeking early on, but later game, if you got a lot of hearts, this thing's pretty much relatively easy. Maybe a little bit of a challenge, but it's not like it's definitely not, in my opinion, A tier. Next we've got the constructs. The constructs, in my opinion, they're relatively easy to face, and they do give good rewards. There's 3 variations to them, I think. Each gives their own different awards. You sometimes have to fight these to get some of the other items, like the maps. I think the constructs they're okay. I do enjoy fighting them, but like they're not my favorite of the mini bosses that you can face. I'm going to put them above the Taluses again as well. Next up we have the Ice Gleeok. Unlike the fire Gleeok, the ice Gleeok, in my opinion, is the third hardest of the four variations of Gleeoks. And the reason I say that is because when any ice enemies in Breath of the Wild hit you, they will freeze you, and it does damage on top of that, and that can be really annoying. Its final attack it's relatively easy to dodge, and the thing that about its final attack though is you can use it against this Gleeok, which is why I think it's fun to face. Again, I wouldn't face this early on, but it is fun to face. It's also a little difficult to face, even when you've got a lot of hearts. So for me, I'm going to put the Ice Gleeok in A tier, below Colgiris. Next up, we have the Frost Talus. The Frost Talus are, in my opinion, they're slightly they're a little more difficult than the Stone Talus. The reason I say that is because with the Stone Talus, your biggest worry about them is the enemies on top of that. Once you get rid of the Stone Talus, or the Talus Fortress, or the enemies on top of the Talus Fortress, you're pretty much able to take out the Talus Fortress as if it's just a regular Talus. With this thing, it's kind of like a regular Talus in a sense, except for the fact that it's found in the snowy areas and it's got a lot of ice on it. And like I said, with ice or frost enemies, if they hit you with an attack, they can freeze you. So your best bet with fighting this is to use something that has fire, or maybe a bomb arrow, to get rid of the ice. Once you do that and knock it down, then you can go at its weak point. In my opinion, it's only slightly better than this Talus Fortress, but not really by too much. Next up, we have the Frogs. The Frogs are these weird one-eyed, they almost look like giant fat lizards or frogs. And they usually have Zonite ore on their back, which are their weak points. And these things are relatively terrifying to face in the underground, especially the obsidian ones, because their attacks are really devastating, because they have the attack where they vacuum you in and they do a crap ton of damage with that. And they also do the belly flop attack where they just belly flop on you. And they have an extremely small weak point in the form of their eye. As well as I think it's 6 weak points on its back. It's a little bit easier to maybe just hit one of the weak points on the back rather than trying to stun it and then get on its back and knock out its weak points. Or you can just use bomb arrows to take care of the weak points on its back, if it even gets in a good position where you can do that. In my opinion, with Frogs, I think they do give a good... They give a good amount of reward to it, because if you are in need of Zonite, you find yourself a Frox, because they can give you a good amount of Zonite from their back. So, in my opinion, the Frogs, I guess I'm going to put it... I'm going to put it below the Gleeok, because the Gleeok, in my opinion, gives a little bit of a better reward for fighting it in terms of its drops. The next... I really wouldn't even consider this too much. It's a mini boss in a way, but at the same time, in my opinion, the Hinox are, for the most part, they're relatively easy, except when you're trying to hit them in the eye and they charge at you, because then they make it hard to shoot them in the eye. But in my opinion, they're not that great as many bosses. Like, they're relatively easy to take out. So I'm going to put them on par with the monster hordes. Next up, we've got the fire Gleeok, or the magma, not Gleeok. We've got the magma talus. In my opinion, the magma talus is... I don't think, in my opinion, it's better. In my opinion, it's a weaker version of the ice one. If you use a splash fruit arrow on it, or I think anything ice, it cools it down a bit and makes it a little easier to defeat. And then you've also got the Ascension rune as well. I'm going to have to put the fire, or the magma talus on in between the ice and slightly above the Talus Fortress. Next up, we've got the King Gleeok. In my opinion, the King Gleeok is definitely one of the harder mini bosses. The King Gleeok, when I first encountered it, I was like, I am not ready to fight one of these things. I am getting out of here. But they are really fun. I really like the design. They are really challenging compared to the other Gleeok variants, because they have a head from each Gleeok. They've got a fire head, a lightning head, and a frost head. And their attacks can be really annoying to deal with, but they are also really fun and really cool looking. And I do enjoy fighting them, but they are not something that should be really fought against early on. So for me, I'm going to have to put this in... I'm going to put it in high A tier. Actually, no. I'm going to put it in S tier, because my reasoning with that is it gives you the horns of all three. And it is really fun, really challenging. Definitely kept me on on my toes when facing it. I'm going to put it in S tier. Maybe that's a bit too. Nah, I'm going to put it a little bit below Dragon Form Ganon, actually. And above Colgearus. Next up, we have the Thunder Gleeox. The Thunder Gleeox share the same quality that annoys me about the Thunder enemies in these games, and that's the fact that if you have a metal weapon and it hits you with its attack, it will shock you and cause you to drop your weapons, and then you have to quickly pick it up before it hits you again. I think that's what makes this one a lot more challenging to face. And in my opinion, that's kind of why out of the 3 Gleeox, out of the 4 Gleeox, I probably would prefer to avoid this at lower levels, because at lower levels, a Fire Gleeok and a Frost Gleeok are not something I wanted to tangle with. As soon as I saw a Frost Gleeok one time, I was like, I'm not going in that area near that thing. And when I saw one of these, I was like, yeah, no, I'm definitely staying away from that thing for a while. With the Thunder Gleeok, they do give good rewards, though, in the form of the horn. It's just they are a bit of a pain in the butt to deal with. In my opinion, I'm going to put these slightly below the Frost one and slightly above the Frox, because they are annoying, and I could easily put them lower, but I really don't think they're worse than B tier. They're challenging, but they do give a decent reward. I'm not putting them above the Frost one because, again, they're annoying because they're the Thunder variant, and they're definitely not on par with, in terms of reward and challenge, as Colgearus and the upper 3 in A tier. Next up, we have the Lynels. In this game, I felt like the Lynels felt a lot more difficult to face. The red main variant of Lynels were challenging in themselves, but whenever you went higher up in terms of difficulty with the variants of Lynels, they always got much more difficult to fight against than the last one. And what they feel a lot more frustrating at times to face, especially the Silvermane armored Lynels that can be found in the depths. When I played Tears of the Kingdom, if I saw a Silvermane armored Lynel in the depths, I was not going near that. I did not care how many hearts I had. Even if I had max amount of hearts down in the depths, I was not touching it, because I had to face a bunch of them in arena during that game playthrough, and that arena was a pain in the butt. especially at the end, because with armored ones, they basically, you have to knock off and break their armor completely, so their armor has a yellow health bar, and then they have their regular health bar underneath that. And a lot of the times with their, whenever I would attack it, it felt like I was barely scratching it. And their weak point is one of the small weak points in the game compared to some of the other enemies in the game. So, in my opinion, while the Lionels do actually have good rewards for killing them, they are often very aggravating to face compared to how they were in Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, they were slightly less irritating somehow, but not really by much. In this game, they are very irritating to face. So, the only thing with Lionels that is keeping them from me putting them in C tier is the drops. And for that, I'm going to probably put it above the Taluses, but not any higher, because with the Taluses, they're relatively too easy, but they do relatively give good drops. The problem with the Lionels that I have is just they can be very infuriating to face. Next up we've got, crap. Hold on. Goma, I think that's what it's called. Let me check, make sure I've got that name right. Let's see. Legend of Zelda. Tears of the Kingdom bosses. Yeah, Marbled Goma. Okay, I had that right. So, Marbled Goma, in my opinion, was it's an okay boss. It's not B tier worthy, but it's not bad enough to be D or F tier. The thing that keeps it at C tier is mainly its drop when you fight it again in the depths if you encounter it. It's a really easy boss fight. All you have to do is just knock out its legs, occasionally send its explosive marbled rock back at it using the resend mechanic or rune, and then wail on its eye, and then it's pretty much taken care of. It's got a good drop, and you can use its drop to make a really decent weapon combination. But it's a little overwhelmed. it's a little bit overwhelmingly underwhelming in terms of how easy it is. So for that, I feel like I kind of have to give it a C tier. It's still really well designed. It feels like it would maybe be like a boss that you would start out first, like World 1-esque boss. Um, Master. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing this right. Master Koga. Master Koga, in my opinion, he's also C tier. Um, he's not that challenging to face, and whenever you face him, all the times in the depths, he's relatively easy to, or he's pretty much really easy to predict. It's just the only thing that's different each time is he's usually on a different vehicle. There's, I can only recall maybe like one of those fights where it was a pain in the butt to fight him because he kept running me over. But other than that, he's kind of like, he's okay. He's more of like a joke kind of boss. So Master Koga, in my opinion, like, I can't really rank him higher than C tier. Like, he's not the worst of C tier, but he's definitely, he's the thing that redeems him is the factor where he's extremely funny. Uh, Next up, we have the Moldugas. Hold on for a second. Alright, next up we have the Molduga. Now, in Breath of the Wild, the Molduga was a really fun enemy, and it wasn't like extremely challenging, but it gave enough of a challenge that it was worthy of praise in Breath of the Wild. In Tears of the Kingdom, however, it has somewhat fallen from grace. The reason I say that is because in Tears of the Kingdom, they took out the bomb runes, which actually made it easier to lure the Moldugas over so that you could then explode it once it decides to eat the bomb, and then you can just hit it on the weak points. The problem with Tears of the Kingdom is you have to go out and find bomb flowers, and then you have to use those with arrows, because when you just regularly throw those, you don't throw incredibly far, and you kind of have to be careful with doing that, because if you throw too short, you might accidentally blow yourself up. So my problem with the Molduga in Tears of the Kingdom is they went from being a relatively decent challenge in terms of like a mini boss and having a good reward to being like a somewhat annoying with being somewhat of an annoying enemy with still a good reward, but it was just very annoying. Realizing that you're out of bombs or bomb arrows, and then having to rely on them a lot. And the only way you could really lure is by firing an arrow onto the ground. It would detect it, go to it, jump out of the ground, and then you'd have to shoot it with a bomb arrow, and then it would fall down, and then you would be able to hit it. So, in my opinion, with Tears of the Kingdom's Moldugas, I feel like they made the Moldugas a bit more challenging when they maybe shouldn't have. So, in my opinion, the Molduga sadly is kind of put in D tier because as good as like getting its the parts that it has, like its fins and stuff, and its jaw, which can make a good weapon, it, in my opinion, it's really annoying having to fight it the way you do in Tears of the Kingdom versus Breath of the Wild. Just so you can get those rewards. And worst part is you do have to face one of these as part of your quest in the Gerudo Desert, so it's kind of annoying having to rely on having a bunch of bombs in order to take care of it. Next up we have, let me make sure I'm pronouncing that one right. What is it? Moragaya, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'll be honest with this one, I forgot about this one after a while. In my opinion, this fight was, while I did kind of forget about it, I'm not putting it in F tier. I really don't think it was forgettable. It's just with some of these enemies, a lot of them are memorable for different reasons. Some for annoying reasons. Others are remembered for either being really good or really bad. This one, it's relatively easy. You don't get anything from it. It's just a point where within a quest that you have to deal with. I don't think it's bad. I actually, from what I do remember about it, it was fun being able to fly around and trying to hit the different heads. But I can't put it really any higher than low C tier. Next enemy in this one, in my opinion, is by far one of the most annoying of the enemies. And it's not even rewarding for how annoying it is. The Muck Rock, which is the boss on the water temple, which floats above the Zora's Domain area, is really annoying to face. I do like its weird muck shark form, but that is not really, in my opinion, that is not enough to save it from F tier. It, in my opinion, it is Just really annoying. And when you face it again in the depths, you would think maybe you would get a nice, like, drop of some kind. But instead, you get parts that you would normally get from Octoroks. And for that reason, I have to place the Muck. Is it Muck Rock? Or no. Can't remember what it's called. Mukta Rock. I have to place the Mukta Rock at pretty much the top of F tier, because the only reason I'm not putting it lower is because I really kind of don't find these two as like good enough mini bosses. I mean, this is just a wave of enemies you normally fight. This is just like a bigger version of some of these, except a little bit difficult. Next up, I'm going to place Phantom Ganon in A tier above the King Gleeok. The reason I'm putting Phantom Ganon, and I'm going to say this can be interchangeable between these two. I would maybe even consider putting it a little bit higher than the Dragon form of Ganon, because with Phantom Ganon, it is a really difficult mini boss that spawns from the Gloom Hand sometimes, and you do encounter these in the fight against Demon King Ganon and in the top of Hyrule Castle. And Phantom Ganon is really fun to face and really tough to face as well, but he does give really good weapon drops, so for that I have to put Phantom Ganon A tier. Next up, we have the Queen Gibbo from the temple in the desert, or in the Gerudo Desert, the Thunder Temple. This boss, in my opinion, she's relatively annoying. Especially second phase, where she summons her minions and you have to get rid of the weird hive things at the top of the temple, or if you're in the underground around the arena, because if she unleashes her enemies on, or her minions on you, then it's going to make it hard to focus on her, because with her you have to focus on her, but then your focus gets changed to the hives and the small gibbos and the flying gibbos that are constantly trying to attack your ankles. So for me, I'm putting the Queen Gibbo at D tier because she is very annoying to deal with at times, especially the second phase. When I faced her, I also made the mistake of fighting her unprepared. But that was my fault. Even when I was fully prepared, I still had a relatively difficult time with her. And with her drop, it's her wing, and in my opinion, out of the 3 drops, out of the 4 drops from the 4 main temple bosses, hers is the 3rd worst. or no, hers is the third one in line. Hers is better than the Mukto Rock, but worse than maybe. Honestly, I'd say she's worse than Colgiris and um like Colgiris. The only reason I put Colgiris in A tier is because he was fun to face. But I will say this about his drop. I'm pretty sure his mandible is not as good as the leg from uh, Marbled Goma. But the Queen Gibbo's wing, it acts as like one of those leaves that you can use to propel yourself on a raft, and it's not that strong when combined with some weapons. So that's why I have to put it in D tier. Next up, we have the Seized Construct. The Seized Construct was... It was relatively easy to face. I didn't have that much difficulty facing it. I maybe died once against it. But once you figure out its patterns, it's not that difficult. So I feel like I'm going to put it interchangeably with Master Koga. Because the reason I'm saying this is because Master Koga, the thing about him is he's hard to take seriously. He has his moments. With this one, relatively easy. I would honestly say it's like maybe slightly harder than Marbled Goma, because it can do a good amount of damage if it hits you with one of its attacks. But it's not like it's not that difficult to really face. Next up, we have the Sludge-like, which is a slightly more annoying version of the like enemies. The Sludge-like is annoying because it has a similar like ability as the Mukta Rock, where it spews spludge everywhere, but unlike the Mukta Rock, it's not as annoying. The thing that kind of holds me back with this one, like, I would probably put it over Mukta Rock any day, just because it really wasn't as annoying. Mukta Rock was really annoying. I hated having to chase after Mukta Rock. With this one, I didn't have to do that too much. All I had to do was hit it with a Splash Fruit arrow and then hit it, and that would pretty much be it. It was not that difficult, but I can't really say it was a good boss fight. I'm putting it at above Mukta Rock. Let's see. Next up, we have the Skeletal Hinox. Skeletal Hinoxes, in my opinion, they're kind of on the same page, a little bit above regular Hinoxes. They aren't... I really don't think they're that difficult as a mini boss. if they can even be called that. Um, I'm going to have to put below Mukta and above the regular Hinoxes. The only thing that kind of makes them a little bit better is the fact that they have that point where you pop their eye out and then hit it and try to make sure it can't get its eye back. But other than that, it doesn't have much going for it. And finally, we have I want to say that's I want to say it's corrupted Yunobo. No, it's just Yunobo. I'm going to say it's corrupted Yunobo or masked Yunobo. Yunobo is one of the champions. Yunobo is he's like in the middle in terms of how good he is as a champion, in my opinion. He's not the best. The only real use I see with him is clearing the way of rocks. Occasionally I use him when fighting enemies, but not that much. Let's see. Corrupted Yunobo was he wasn't really that great of a boss fight, if I've gotta be honest. I'd say, honestly, if I had to place him anywhere, it'd be maybe D tier or C tier. He wasn't annoying that much, except for the times where I tried to hit him and I couldn't for some reason. But he really wasn't that much of a pain in the butt compared to, say, like the Queen Gibbo or Mukta or some of these other ones. But, like, he also has a decent award attached to him in the form of a champion. But, like, he's just not that great as a boss fight. I'm going to probably have to put him high F tier. Because he's not annoying. He's not really annoying, it's just he's very bland. And, like, the only thing... Actually, no. See... I'm going to put him maybe above... the Gibbo Queen. Because... unlike her... like... I'd say getting a champion, in my opinion, is a lot better than getting a... like, with her, she's got that drop where it's her wing, and it's not the best drop, in my opinion. It's not the worst drop compared to Mukta, but it's not Marble Goma or Colgiris's drop, so... in my opinion, I think he's slightly better as a like a mini boss than Gibbo was as a boss. But I hope y'all have enjoyed this video. Like I said earlier, make sure you are subscribed and have your notifications on, so hopefully you'll get the polls and other stuff from the community page as well. I hope that y'all enjoyed this, and I will be releasing a poll with different ideas soon so that I can make another video. So stay tuned for that. I hope that you all have a great day. Bye.